how much of a runway, to use your word, do we actually have here before, oh shoot, we really need to make an adjustment? Whether that's to start looking for a new job immediately, to take some time off to rest, to regroup and recover.
Hey Nick,
Scott, what's going on?
had a call this week that's a little alarming for
Okay.
a client. I thought we'd talk that through today because I think it's going to be hitting more people um, in the coming weeks. I think it's already hitting a lot of people, and that's just simply some. We're starting to see layoffs,
Total.
and
Mhm.
specifically in the tech space,
Yeah.
where companies are reducing headcount and calling it for whatever number of reasons. It looks like most of them are pushing toward a more AI driven future. So, wanted to walk through what we did to when someone came to that moment. If you're in that moment, let's give a framework today to help someone hopefully not I'm not going to say be at ease, but be more at ease with the situation that you're dealing with, where it sometimes can feel really scary in the moment.
Right. And I think, whether you're in the tech space or it's mainly a W-2 job, like this moment can happen at any time,
Hmm.
right? It's at will employment. And
Yeah.
so, the best time to prepare is while you still have a job.
Yeah.
And so walking through some practical applications of while you have that job today, what are things that we can do to, we'll say bulletproof that plan so that, should that ever happen, right? It's probably still going to come as a surprise, but if we're prepared and we have maybe we'll say this checklist, it can help really put things at ease until we find that next job.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So, I mean, the first thing that we did when we got on the call, we didn't know that we thought we were just having a normal call. It was myself
Hmm.
and an associate advisor,
Okay.
and then our client let us know that that had just happened for
Mm.
them at the firm, and about I think like 10% of their workforce or something like that was eliminated. Um, so the first thing that we did was just, oh my gosh, be with them,
Right.
empathy. You
Yeah.
know, that was what a huge change this is, and a scary change, and we need to acknowledge that before we just start looking at all the numbers. The
Hmm.
numbers don't really matter so much if we're not, uh, present and together.
Yeah, it's like, I think of like the shell shock analogy where the bomb exploded right around you and you don't hear or see anything. It's like that disorientation you see in movies where they're probably not even hearing anything you say. So just to take a few deep breaths to sit in that space, to hold that space in that moment before proceeding. We'll get to the numbers later, but figuring out the here and now is so important.
Absolutely, and there was both, the both spouses were there, and you could see you could feel the worry on them, like, how are they gonna be okay in this situation? And so once we had a chance to, be with that emotion and acknowledge it and feel it and let it pass, we did turn to the finances, and we turned initially to probably the most important thing for most people is just simply looking at the exact moment, the severance package, and what is coming for you. So
Hmm.
we can get a sense of, well, what's yet to come.
Right. There's a lot of stuff in there. Similar to our employer handbook, when you get a severance package, there's a lot of information, whether it's uh, to do with health insurance and how long that's going to last, if there's going to be a bonus, a one time payout, if you have equity compensation, what that means for that. There's a lot of language in there.
Exactly, and for this particular client, it involved, a certain number of weeks of severance, it
Hmm.
involved a certain number of weeks of severance for years served, it involved, of course, any PTO that had built up, it included, the annual bonus, that was set to pay, and then, I believe it was a full year's worth to come of equity comp. So there was a lot of compensation there. When you look at every single piece on its own, it doesn't really all come together. When you take it all together and add it up to a number, and then you kind of translate that to weeks. And then there was a little bit of a, even though the layoff was essentially immediate, there's pay through a number of months that were still to come into the summer, right? So it just made it so there's actually a lot of runway there to
Hmm.
figure out what do we want to do next. So that was somewhat helpful to process that.
Oh, of course. I think once you pull all those different things apart, I it's easy for me to say like, hey, let's go put it on a spreadsheet, but it helps to have a visual representation of like what are we actually dealing with here. Sometimes those packets can be so big, so confusing. Um, so to actually pull that apart and say, how much of a runway, to use your word, do we actually have here before, oh shoot, we really need to make an adjustment. Whether that's to start looking for a new job immediately, to take some time off to rest, to regroup and recover. There's big decisions, I would say. I'd put these in two categories that probably need to be made immediately. And then there's other things that we can get to a little later that are more secondary, if you will.
Yeah, I would fully agree with that. And I think where you're at with not only that severance package, um, but then the next thing that we went and looked at really quickly was, we do a great job of helping clients keep track of how much income do you make, and if you're a couple working, how much do each of you make,
Right, right.
net of taxes, right? Like if we just wipe away all of your income, what's the deficit for the family here on a monthly basis?
Hmm.
And for this client, it was around, I think, like 8 or $9,000 a month was gonna be the deficit. Well, then we just went and looked at, well, what's your balance sheet look like today?
Hmm.
And on the balance sheet, we have, of course, IRAs and 401ks and Roths that we can't go touch easily. We also have a taxable account, and we're gonna have this severance money as well. And then we just looked at how many months of cash flow are you gonna be able to support yourself and be okay?
Mm.
And once we did that and gave it to that real concrete number that it was years of cash flow available, you just watch the worry melt.
Yes. I really like that phrase. I don't think often enough, and I'm guilty of this as well. I think financial advisors, but potentially folks listening as well, when we see a balance sheet or we look at, our cash or our brokerage account, having it translated into years or even months of living expenses is so helpful because it's like, what is the purpose of this? Right? And to be
Yes.
able to say, "Okay, this is actually what it's there for," right?
Yes.
So it does 2 things for me. 1, it creates that runway that you talked about earlier, like,
Yeah.
"Okay, I don't actually have to go take the first job offer if I don't like it, and I
Yes.
don't have to rush into it," right? Number 2, my mind then goes to, "Oh, how is that invested today? And if I actually need it,"
Mhm.
because when I was investing it before, it
Yep.
was probably just extra money that we did not need, and
Correct.
so therefore probably invested a little more aggressively. And so if we need it today, well, we probably need to have a conversation around, hey, if we're starting to use this is our quote unquote war chest, let's adjust it, right? Because it's probably a
Mhm.
little too aggressive now that we need it to start living from to cover
Well,
that gap.
we actually didn't even bring that up because the majority of their, um, brokerage account is being used to potentially save for a down payment on a house in the future. So it's in
Well,
a
there you go.
very conservative state already.
Yeah.
So but to your point, I love where your head went with that. It's the question of like, is the asset allocation correct for the goal that we currently have? Because it may have shifted, which is exactly the frame that I would look at as well. I think you're nailing that.
Yeah, which I
But
mean, you could probably add some color to this, but they've probably been clients for a number of years, and you've been slowly building up that brokerage account
mhm.
during good times, right?
Yes,
Where it's like times of excess or surplus, like, oh, hello, this is when we need it, and then we're so glad that we did that because
yes,
now we don't have to tap that 401k or that IRA, get hit with ordinary income taxes and a penalty.
yes, exactly. And to your point about I don't have to go rush out and get the next job if I don't like it. Um, when this client was able to reflect on the work that they were doing, it kind of felt a little, uh, I don't know that I might put words in, but if, I'm gonna say soul sucking. Like it wasn't, they didn't feel like they were a part of a mission that they really believed in at this point. Right. So for them to no longer have to go rush to do that, they have a family, they can focus on summer. Essentially, they were thrown into a summer sabbatical that they that
Another
they
way to
can
look at it. Yeah.
enjoy with their family, and then turn their attention to what they wanna do next. What a great place to be. But and it is because of the work that they've done to this point to be prepared for it, and the severance that's coming, and, there's things that we'll look at as the year moves forward for, tax planning and other things that we can perhaps do to help them. But just the mindset of the framework of allow yourself to feel the feeling of whatever you're feeling, and then go look at what am I going to get as far as an exit is concerned. Let's map that out to if it's a taxable amount. Let's think about what we're going to have to pay in taxes so we know what's left after taxes. We didn't mention that before, but that is the frame that we used. And then we take that and we can translate that to numbers of weeks that we have available. And then we can go look at
Mhm.
the balance sheet and see the numbers of weeks we have available. And we can make the game of where are we going to pull funds from if we have to. This family doesn't need to go make big changes for themselves on their budget. If they did need to make big changes, the next thing to do would be to go look at the budget and ask myself, what can I get rid of that won't take away from my life, that I can do without for a while,
Mhm.
to reduce that 9,000 to maybe 8 or 7 or 6 or whatever the number is, right? You may or may not need to do that, but that is kind of the next thing if you're in that space, because this is the mindset that I'm seeing in the tech field, just anecdotally from my view, is I'm seeing executives looking at, we need to reduce headcount to prove that this AI thing works. And you and I were joking about it on the way in because we use AI in our own businesses and systems, but I'm in Claude all the time telling Claude that it's close but wrong. And I feel like they're letting go of a lot of these higher up managed folks, letting the low, and I'm not saying the people on the lower rungs aren't doing great work, but if they don't have the institutional knowledge, it's going to be interesting to see if some mistakes are made along the way.
Oh, that output, right? We say it in our financial planning framework, like the data, the output's only as good as the input. If we don't have that oversight, we spend half of our time fixing prompts.
It's not an AI job here, but we use financial planning software where we understand, we've done the work with, I'm holding up a calculator on my
Yeah.
the old
I
10
remember having
the
to
HP,
scribe it out on
been
notebooks.
around
Yeah.
forever. You can do all the planning that's in financial planning on a calculator, but you actually know how to do it. And if you just go say that I put the number in the system, therefore the number is correct, dangerous. And I feel like that's going to be happening, but that's an aside from what's happening. I feel for the people that are being affected, and I'll be interested to see if we over um, lay off more people than intended and then have to walk that back over time to get the systems to be working correctly for people.
Yeah. And I think that reframe oftentimes is so helpful. I've met with, I mean, really just any job vocation, but met recently with an attorney who was not let go, but put on a performance plan. And that really is this kind of a light bulb moment where he's like, I don't even like this job. It is no longer accomplishing what I originally set out to. My vision, my purpose, it does not align with what I want to be doing. And so, in similar situations, this could almost work as a forcing mechanism, especially if you have that cash flow built up to say, what is it? Right. And hopefully you're fortunate in a situation because of this runway where you can be selective. You can create that alignment to say, hey, I'm going to be really deliberate, really intentional in this new job that I choose to enter into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the interesting is this person was actually outperforming everything. I think it's just a structural a restructuring of a
Of
firm where they're going to
course. Of
reduce
course.
headcount and they have to let people go. But I hear what you're saying. And this person doesn't necessarily love the work they were doing. So hopefully, to your point, they can find something better to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the keys. The other thing I would add is like if you go look at your balance sheet and all of your money is in a 401k, it's not the end of the world.
No.
What will happen is your income will more than likely start to go down depending on what the severance package looks like, and you might have to take some withdrawals from that for a little while, and you will pay a tax penalty for that. But more often than not, you're in a lower tax bracket already anyway, so it's kind of ends up being a bit of a wash, but maybe not perfectly, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah. And then where my mind goes, technically speaking, when it comes to healthcare, right? You generally have a couple different options.
Yeah.
Those options change if you're married versus single.
Hmm.
Traditionally, you have this thing called Cobra. I want to make a really bad joke, like it's not a snake, but yeah. But
It was a bad joke.
I know it's the new
You're
dad.
working in your dad jokes. Come
I
on.
know. I know. Learning you are right. There's another one. But you have, I believe it's 16 to 18 months
I think it's
Um,
18,
it's
yeah.
18 months worth of coverage. Now, it's not necessarily coverage. You still have to pay for it,
It
right?
becomes expensive compared to what you're used to paying.
It absolutely is because your company was subsidizing it,
Yeah.
right? But it allows you to keep that same level of coverage.
Mhm.
If you're married, you can have that conversation of going on your spouse's
Yes.
coverage. Their paycheck's going to reflect that, right? Because that's now an additional expense. Or you can look at the open care marketplace as well, um, where you have about a 60-day window, a special election period, to be able to make that decision once your coverage ends. Hopefully, in the severance option, right? Outside of Cobra, maybe your employer said, "Hey, here's a kicker, here's a bonus, here's a healthcare pot," right, for that as well. But that's also something you're going to want to go through while we're figuring out cash flow.
Yeah, that was the open-ended question for us, was it looks like that's what they were doing for a number of months, but we weren't 100% sure yet, so that's, to be determined.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But really, I feel for people going through this,
Yeah.
and I also know that it's going to happen, it looks like a bit more and more, as the, not only the tech corporations, but all the other corporations are kind of, uh told that they want to see productivity gains with AI. It looks like this is coming, so it's a good moment to reflect on how you're set up. Reflect on what would you do if something were to happen, and what would your plan be, and then just make sure that you've talked this through with your spouse, or what would you guys do, and how would you make things happen?
Absolutely. I mean, my mind goes to, right, the best place to be right now, if that has not occurred, is with a job, right? And so, to your point of like the preparedness is knowing what our expenses are. To your point earlier, your family, they knew that shortfall, but they also knew there was probably a range where they're like, maybe it's 9,000, but could we actually cut this or this to make it 7,000? So knowing your numbers so important. And then while you still have a job, saving like that's coming is so crucial, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope this is helpful for anyone who is going through this time. Yeah, if you guys need help, we're always want to be of the most help that we can. You, of course, can take the retirement quiz if you want to know more about how much you need to retire. So there's that, and then it's like, hopefully it turns the tide on the layoff sooner rather than later. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah.
look that way.
Yeah. But reach out. That's what we're here for if you have questions.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, until next time, sir. Appreciate you.
Likewise.